over the last 2 years. They were deemed to support the growth and development of a diverse cohort of students, professionals, and leaders in the field of architecture and design. In the introduction and the 9 subsequent chapters, each topic begins with a baseline explanation, including defining fundamental language and concepts necessary to further the conversation in your own daily practices. Then they delve into the research, suggest best practices for approaching these topics around employment and professional development in professional settings, and offer testimonials from architects and designers who have struggled with, and in several cases overcome, obstacles in their workplace related to inclusion and equity. The specific topic we will do today, which I guess is on recruitment and retention. Okay. In August, the BSA published a companion resource guide to the AIA's Comprehensive Guide for Equitable Practice. The BSA's Equity in Practice Resource Guide consists of summaries and excerpts from the AIA Guide, and we heard many times over that one of the biggest hurdles to overcome was knowing where to start. It is meant as an entry point to using the AIA's guides, and there are links to the AIA guides as well as many other resources provided by the BSA within the document. Here is the list of the number of various guides that the BSA has available to us. Also, a number of these can be found on the EDI page on the website. When we gather into our roundtables, we would ask that you keep one goal top of mind. Listen to be changed rather than listen to be reinforced. It is easy to clearly hear points of view that align with your own, but it is harder to open yourself to listening to perspectives that differ from your own. Please do the hard work and attend with an open mind.
So thanks. I'll dive in here, and thanks Tony and Dan for setting us up. So today's topic, as we mentioned, is going to be on recruitment and retention. So the format for those of you who are joining us today is going to be similar to our October meeting. If any of you joined us at that point, we're going to break this topic into 3 segments, and each one of those is going to be followed by a breakout session, and then we'll come back together at the end also to talk about what we all learned together. So next slide, and we'll get started. So the AIA's Guide for Equitable Practice tied together the 2 topics of recruitment and retention for a reason. They both deal with talent, which for any professional services firm is the lifeblood of our organizations. So the 2 really feed off of each other. A healthy and diverse recruitment process breathes energy and vitality into a workforce, and a strong workforce culture and employees who are supported with retention in mind reduces employee turnover and attracts the best new talent when it comes to recruitment. And this is true no matter what size firm you work for. Next slide. So before we get into recruitment and retention separately, I thought we could set the stage by talking a bit about talent management. Recruitment and retention are both driven by engagement, and a firm's best position to driving engagement is using education, training, mentoring, coaching, and support to unlock a person's potential to maximize their own performance. So it's important to recognize that the types of support that your talented employees need to ensure retention varies wildly depending on the stage that they're in during their career. So the illustration on this stage is actually a wonderful drawing that one of my colleagues, Bill Spalding, who's the Director of Education and Training at Bergmeyer, created a couple years ago. And what I really loved is he likened the arc of a career to the topography of hiking in the mountains. And those of you who know me as an avid hiker, this really spoke to me, so I hope it speaks to you too. So there isn't a single upward trajectory that you take in your career. Rather, there are a lot of different peaks and valleys that people face through all of the different milestones of your career. And those peaks are often followed by lows as employees achieve something and then struggle with identifying what's next for me in my career, especially in the mid-career portion, as you kind of see illustrated here in this slide. So what's important for us as organizations and as people who are working together with our colleagues is to create bridges through these life stages. So whether it's, again, achieving licensure, through becoming a new parent, through transitioning from being a manager to a leader, which are two entirely different skill sets, we really need to identify that these peaks and valleys exist and to develop support structures to bridge in crossing these valleys. Next slide. This is especially true when it comes to recruitment and retention of your talented employees from underrepresented demographics in the field of architecture, be it architects of color or women, any demographic. It's especially true because in addition to all of those career stage challenges that they face that I mentioned in the previous slide, they're also needing to overcome implicit and explicit bias in recruitment practices and career advancement opportunities. So again, let's keep in mind that while we're recruiting for diversity, we also then need to embrace those differences and not train for sameness once we get into the retention phase. We'll talk a lot more about this corporate pipeline as we get into the individual topics of recruitment and retention, but it's important to acknowledge the effect that these compounding challenges have on representation throughout all tiers of an organization. Next slide. So I'll turn it over to Dan, who's going to get us started with our first breakout group.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to do breakout rooms and groups of about 5, and this is really just to get to know everyone. And then the next 2 breakout rooms will be in the same group. So we'd like you to just introduce yourself in 30 seconds, where you work, what type of work you do, and just say what is the strongest attribute which initially drew you to your current company. And so these will be small groups, and we'll have about 3 minutes. So I'll put you in breakout rooms now. Hi, to those just joining us, we are in breakout sessions right now, but we're going to be rejoining the larger group in just 1 minute.
Hello.
Hi there. I'm
Hi.
sorry, we are currently in breakout rooms as part of this session, but we're coming back to the larger group in just a minute.
Yeah, I don't, okay. Could you read my chat, please?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no way to join the breakout rooms if you're calling in on a phone, right?
Yes, you should be able to join on your phone, and I'll just have to assign you once we re-break out next time.
So I logged in on my computer at work, but I don't have audio there. Like I don't have a camera or audio, so I was trying to do, I think I'm just gonna leave and watch the recording because I can't figure this out.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, because they're
It's
separate.
okay. I think that it just needs to be clear in the instructions. I haven't also used Ring Central before, so that could be part of the problem. But thank you.
Okay, I apologize for that. So welcome back to everyone. We're just waiting for a couple more people to get back into the larger group.
Why don't you let me know when we're all back, Dan, and I'll get started with the next slide.
It looks like we just rejoined, all of us.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Great. So if you could bring it to the next slide, perfect. So our next section, we're going to talk about recruitment, and then we'll get into retention after our next breakout group. So I thought we could start by just talking about the different stages of the recruitment process, which we have to be particularly attuned to as we establish an equitable recruitment practice. So starting with the recruitment plan and identifying the essential skills of the position, and ensuring that you create a job description with inclusivity as a main factor. So we'll get into language a little bit later, but making sure that you're avoiding using gender-coded words, and limiting your requirements to the must-haves. It's interesting statistic that men are more likely to apply for jobs in which they meet only 60% of the qualifications that are listed, where women are much more likely to hesitate unless they meet 100% of the requirements. So if you stick to the must-haves, you'll see a much wider variety of candidates, as opposed to if you start adding in all of the nice-to-haves to that same application or same job description. Moving to the talent search, start thinking about where are you finding your candidates. Ask yourself the hard questions. Who are you seeing regularly? Are you going out to the same schools, the same talent network that have driven the people that are already there within an organization? Or are you really looking to uncover new and diverse talent through whether it's schools or other organizations that are different than the current complexion of the firm that you are now? So really focus on who you're not seeing as opposed to who you're seeing regularly. Getting into interviewing, looking at training your interviews, thinking about making sure that your interviewers know what can and cannot be asked during an interview. All of the questions that you focus on should be focused on qualifications, job skills, prior employment, and educational background. You can't ask questions such as marital status, whether people are parents, etc. And you need to train your interviewers to understand and overcome implicit bias. For example, if an interviewee volunteers that they're a parent, ensure that assumptions are not made about schedule modifications that they may or may not need, and that doesn't play into a conversation or an assessment about the potential commitment that they would have to an organization as you review them for a position. And then finally, make sure that you're offering during the interview stage an assessment rubric that all of your interviews are using. Those can really help to reduce bias. So using assessment rubrics that really ensure that you are not getting an editorial point of view, but a true assessment on the skills that you have identified as necessary for the position is of utmost importance. And then finally, as you get into the selection or offer stage, if you've successfully eliminated bias in the prior 3 sections, you'll most likely be able to evaluate the candidates on their qualifications, skills, and potential. Be mindful of the candidate in the evaluation and how you're determining what a culture fit is. Is it clear and consistent, or is it they look like me and come from a similar background? This includes not only race and gender, but also socioeconomic and religious background as well. And when it comes to the offer, it goes back to the conversation we had in October when we talked about compensation strategy. In order to create a fair offer, reviewing the candidate's skills and experience against current employees requires that you ensure that you've taken the time to review your overall compensation structure for biases based on gender, race, and other factors. Next slide. So how can we as individuals and as firms address the pipeline? This is something that comes up regularly when we talk about how to infuse diversity in the practice of architecture. So from the statistics recently released by NCARB, we can see that schools are increasingly diverse and candidates initially entering the architecture registration program are increasingly diverse. But there are still many factors which need to be addressed with the retention of women and people of color throughout the process, let alone in later stages of the profession. So we'll address this more in the retention section, but certainly it affects the candidate pool that you see. I just want to point out four different organizations that are related to the BSA who are actively working on this question of pipeline and how we can diversify the pipeline into the profession. So I want to highlight NOMA and Project Pipeline, which is something that they've really launched in 2020 and brought some great attention to. So they're introducing the profession of architecture and teaching the value of design to populations who may not have visibility to the practice and including college preparation within that. There's also the BSA Foundation's youth programs, such as Kids Build, We Design Together, and high school internship programs in conjunction with the city of Boston. There's thinking about attracting candidates from outside New England. There's a whole wide world of diverse candidates outside of New England, and taking the time to travel virtually or in person during the recruiting process to recruit from diverse regions is only going to help you as you identify opportunities for diversifying your candidate pool. And finally, there's looking at national scholarship programs. If your organization could take that on as an opportunity, again, whether in conjunction with another organization or throughout your organization individually, that also can open you up to a much wider candidate pool. Next slide. So when we talked about writing the job description, I mentioned that language matters. If there's one thing that diversity statistics tell us, it's that candidates do a lot of research to find out how companies treat their employees. At the same time, generic statements like, we respect everyone, don't work, because that's how every business should be run. You need to be specific about how you demonstrate that respect by discussing your values. Take a look at your outward-facing communication, your website, your social media presence, your job postings, and where your staff and leadership are outwardly connected. What are you truly doing that is setting yourself apart? To really let diverse job seekers know that you respect and value them, there are three things among many that you could look to do. So first of all is really looking at your job descriptions and ensuring that you're using gender neutral terms. Think about the difference between using the terms ambitious or driven versus loyal or collaborative. They have very different connotations and they're going to attract a very different type of candidate. And there are many, many sources online that you can look to who could provide an overview of gender coded words that you can avoid. Secondly, communicate your commitment to education, training, and support through all stages of the person's career. Be open about benefits, including work flexibility, community engagement, educational opportunities, and the like. If you have documents that you've created as an organization, such as leadership criteria or advancement criteria, consider sharing those, whether it's through your outwardly facing media or during the interview, so that candidates truly understand your commitment to equity and inclusive advancement. And finally, discuss your firm's values clearly and openly. Given a position of similar responsibilities that a candidate across two different organizations, the alignment of values of that individual with an organization are ultimately what's going to make the difference to a job seeker. Excellent. Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you. We have a couple questions that we are going to talk about when it comes to recruitment from your own experience.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rachel. So, so these are just some points to remember from what Rachel just discussed. And we have formulated some questions for the breakout groups. So we're going to break out into the same groups that we were just in. So hopefully you got to know each other. And I can put the questions in the chat as well. But we'd like you to consider how narrow or wide is your company's recruitment pipeline, and how would you widen the pool which you recruit from as a company and as a larger profession. And then second, what cues do you look for as a candidate that indicate a company truly has a corporate commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, excuse me. So I'll put you all into breakout rooms now, and we'll have about 10 minutes for this breakout session. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all for rejoining. Let's just give everyone a couple more seconds to get back settled in the larger room. Okay, it looks like we're all back. So Caroline, I think I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thanks everyone. It's really interesting to hear the discussions that that we're having. So we're gonna have a few minutes now focused on the topic of retention. So once we've recruited this bunch of really amazing, talented, awesome people, how do we keep them? And as employees, how do we advocate for ourselves and staying where we are? So one of the best ways to do that is to keep your employees engaged and to stay engaged as an employee. So this, I have a few slides in here that are pulled from the Equity by Design surveys, which if you're not familiar with, they're a really fantastic resource. They've been done on a biannual basis. And there's some really helpful statistics and thoughts in there. I would encourage everyone to look at them if they haven't. But this slide focuses on top retention predictors. So what can we look at to see which people are going to stay? And the ones I'd point to are the shared values. So as Rachel mentioned, being very clear about defining those for potential employees and for employees, and then meaningful work. So I think we'll spend just a minute, if we go to the next slide, Dan, on what is meaningful work, and we'll get there in a second, but why is it important to keep employees? So I think this statistic is an important one. It can cost up to 5 times an annual salary to replace an employee. So there's a big economic cost, as well as the cultural and kind of softer impacts that might be harder to measure. There's a real financial one. And so I think keeping this in mind and reminding others of this as needed is an important one. And then thinking about the push versus pull factors. So are people leaving, or are you thinking of leaving because something else looks really great, or because there's certain things that are making you feel unhappy or uncomfortable or disengaged in your current practice? And as the firm, what are you doing to make sure that you have the right pull factors for people? And so better opportunities we would classify as a pull factor. You're being pulled somewhere else because there's more opportunities there, versus push factors, lack of advancement, or low pay. So I think common experiences of not being able to move up in the firm that they currently are, they're able to go out onto the market and find a better situation by moving. So, oh, my computer's not working. Am I working? Can you hear me? No?
You were cutting out for a minute there, Caroline, but I think I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, next slide. So meaningful work, how do we define this? This is probably a bit too much of a diagram to get into now, but there's a great paper. We can share the link. The AIA links it in their resources on how do you measure the meaning of meaningful work. And so those include things, identifying values both as an individual and firm, creating an inclusive work environment, which I know has been the topic of others of these presentations in more detail, and then providing equitable feedback and opportunities for advancement. So making sure that as audio isn't clear. I'm sorry, I don't know what could be causing that. Okay. I'm not sure. If no one can hear me, maybe Dan or Rachel, you could pick up for the last slide. I think we're almost there. But if no one can hear me, I don't want that to be the case.
Caroline, why don't you try to get your video off? Sometimes that helps.
Okay. No, I'm muted. I'm not sure. I've never had a problem.
It sounds better now that your video's off. So why don't we go with that?
Okay, I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. We're all rolling with it.
Okay, so this I think is just another version of the really fantastic visual that Rachel had put up earlier, but thinking about pinch points. So this is really knowing what employees need when. And that's going to change sometimes really dramatically over the course of people's lives and careers. And so I know that there's a pattern of annual reviews, but what are other ways that you can check in with employees to understand where they see themselves? Are they at a valley or are they at a peak? And how can you help support them and build those bridges that Rachel showed across? So I think now we're going to go. Dan, do you want to introduce us into the next round of breakout rooms?
Yeah, so thank you, Caroline, and the audio did fix at the end, so thanks for sticking with it. So our last breakout group session will also be just about 10 minutes, and so what we're going to discuss is kind of the retention stuff that Caroline had just introduced. So how do you define and experience meaningful work, and is your current work aligned with your values and interests? And then second, what has made you feel more or less engaged at work over the course of your career, and recognizing that that will change as you kind of progress in your career. And then lastly, what factors have led or might lead to you considering moving jobs? And are there push or pull factors? And what can be done to address those factors? So I will put you back in the same breakout groups. And I would ask, since this is the last breakout session that we'll be doing, that each of your groups kind of discusses someone who could maybe bring the thoughts and ideas that you all talk about back to the larger group when we do our recap at the end. Welcome back, everyone. Just give everyone just a minute here to rejoin the room. All right. So I hope you guys had great discussions. So we just wanted to pose a couple questions on sort of our report back as we kind of rejoin the larger group. So I'd like to just ask all of you if someone from your group was designated to speak, or if you want to just jump in, go ahead and unmute yourself. So we'd like to know what examples were shared in your breakout groups of equitable recruitment practices, and what efforts have been made to encourage diversity. We know that this is a thing that probably many firms and many of you have experienced, that people are trying to diversify their practice and their employees. And so we'd love to hear examples of what you feel has been successful. You can feel free to raise your hand or just unmute any of that.
I'll report with the group that was with Rachel. We really only touched on the first and second topics on the list that we were given, questions we were given before the breakout group. But the things that were listed for a meaningful experience or engagement had to do with the types of project work, the type of work within that. So like what I took it to mean what phase you were on, or what kind of role you had on the project, and making sure that the alignment of what the employee is interested in aligns with the work that they're doing. And then kind of interestingly, a commitment to the wider community and somehow making that part of the office and the work that you do. And I also added that growth and mentorship were things that kept me engaged. And someone else in the group had said that they had started, instead of annual reviews, doing growth plans and letting the employees kind of drive how that was, and then try to support them in their own growth, rather than having at the end of the year, kind of touching base and see how you did based on some criteria, abstract or not. And there was, I feel like I'm missing something. So if anybody else from my group wants to jump in and say, otherwise that's what we talked about.
I think that idea of a growth plan is fantastic. That's such great feedback. And I have heard, I think you mentioned also social, this kind of social value of the firm and the work you're doing. And that's something we've kind of consistently seen through the EDI efforts that we've been doing, is that people are drawn to places where they can make a difference and have an impact. So that's, I think, really great feedback. Would any of the other groups like to share what they discussed? I know we're kind of getting short on time here, so please go ahead and unmute to either the questions or just a general comment on what you discussed as the small groups.
Since there was a pause, I'll jump in quickly for my breakout group. And I guess one of the things was how they were looking to recruit better, whether it was using LinkedIn Recruiter, going to their large networks on LinkedIn to check with their friends and see if they knew anyone. Of course, headhunters. One person mentioned going to historically Black college and university fraternity groups to look for opportunities to find other people, to see what kind of diversity existed at the typical schools that they may generally tap to look for new candidates. And one of the great things that kept people around were new opportunities at their offices. And
Tony, just out of respect for everyone's time, I think I'm sorry that we didn't have as much time to kind of recap as we normally do, but I'm going to move on to sort of the wrap up stuff so that people who
Yes.
jump off can do so. So I'll hand it over to you again.
Okay. Okay. I guess in all this thing, sometimes we have to look at what we discovered and what we will do next. Okay. For the firms, what adjustments do you think, based on these conversations, you will make that'll strengthen your work culture, attract other individuals to your offices? And what can you do to support your staff to ensure they're always growing and they feel engaged? For the individuals, what are the push-pull factors that you think you heard about which will affect your experiences in offices? And in some cases, what adjustments do you feel are necessary to feel more engaged in your current role at your office? The two have to kind of work together, both the company and the individual, to figure if there's a synergy which will keep you where you're at, or if there's a need to move forward. Other than that, upcoming events. Of course, the BSA's Race and Architecture Series continues on November 24th with housing and the role of the designer. And our current president, Natasha Spada, and our president-to-be, Gregory Minot, will be hosting that event. As for Bostonoma, there will not be a monthly meeting this month. We will convene again in December. Please keep an eye out for those who are members of Bostonoma. There will be some announcements regarding maybe a possible open position and some maybe changes to our bylaws, which are a few years old. I will be looking at that and passing information off to all the members. Also, ABX, Bostonoma and EDI have joined some forces together here to make some presentations on December the 23rd at ABX. We hope you attend. We have a topic on the future of equitable practice. We have several podcasts which we will be engaged in. And also, there will be a brave conversation at lunchtime. This is a topic that typically is handled in NOMA, our brave conversations, which encourage talking about how we try to help disenfranchised people and how we move forward in the profession. Please go to the NOMA website to get all the basic breakdown of what BRAVE stands for, and maybe you may wish to participate in this conversation. Other than that, something new is coming up. It's called Listen for a Change. In actuality, this is going to be a new, I'll say, book club that may be starting up very soon. If you're interested, please contact, there's an email here, winwin@softyarchitects.com. You can also contact me or any of the members of the co-chairs of the BEI network to get more information. Moving forward quickly, we have another session coming up next month on negotiation as part of the EDI network's breakdown of AIA Guides for Equitable Practice. Please keep posted, and we'll let you know when you can sign up for that presentation. Other than that, we wish to thank you for your participation and for being interested as always, and we hope to see some of your faces again at our next several meetings. We'll be doing these presentations, I believe, through July for all chapters in the Equitable Practice Guide. Thank you, and please, we hope to see you again. And with that, we're over time, and so I hate to say it, but we have to leave you now. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we hope to see you again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.